Hello there, and welcome to the Dr. Elisa Show on KUHS Denver, the stream. Thank you so much for joining me. I say it every time, don't I? I love being on the radio, but I love even better when I hear back from you that this show has been meaningful, has been inspirational, has ignited something within you. So please keep those comments coming. I respond to really everyone. You can find me and email me at elisarobin.com. You can also find me on Facebook at the Dr. Elisa Show. I'm also on, Twitter and Instagram and LinkedIn. So you can find me everywhere under Elisa Robin. So thank you. I've got an amazing guest today. Before I do that, I want to just do a couple shout outs. As you know, one of my goals on this show is that each of us become a philanthropist in some way, which could be $1 a month. It doesn't have to be a lot of money, it's the intention. And this year I'm supporting the MS Society. I actually, on my Facebook site, you can find out about the MS hike that happens in July that I raise money for. My brother died from his MS meds, and it's been close to my heart ever since then. And I also sponsor my own show. So again, you can find me. I have packages. I can do a one-shot, but it'll get you over a hump with astrology and my psychology. And I also have packages to help you live life on the loose. So enough about, and just one last thing. I realized I kept telling you I had the book, The Way of the Well. So many of you are buying it and letting me know how much you enjoy it, so thank you. It's a little bit like the Celestine Prophecies, except that it's from a woman's point of view. So it's a romantic, spiritual adventure, Way of the Well on Amazon. And I actually also, I never remembered to do this, but I've also got a leadership book. It's called Pirate Wisdom. It's short, it's sweet, and it shares all of my secrets about how I survived being an academic dean. So check those out if you get a chance. Okay. I'm so excited about my guest today that I just want to get into it. Hi, Allie. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I have to start with a story. So all of my listeners know that I always start with, how has this person inspired me? Because I have people on who've inspired me in some way, shape, or form. And Allie and I, we were just talking about it. We had this meeting at a women's group. We sort of zeroed in on each other. I think we didn't even know each other's names, but we exchanged business cards. And then through synchronicity and through the sort of magical connection, we became more and more connected. So I just want to do a little introduction for you, and then I'm going to have you do the rest of the introduction, okay? So
Sounds good.
She's an executive advisor. We'll talk about what that is. And I want you to know that her website says she helps women walk through the world like executives, with confidence, but without being cocky. Actually, I'm paraphrasing. Asking for what they need without apologizing, and leading in ways that makes others feel safe and respected and valued. And then here's what got me. I'm on her page, and at the very bottom she says that she wants women to walk in their power without asking for permission or approval. And I remember reading that and thinking, oh my gosh, I worked with somebody to get my power statement. And my power statement is, I want to walk in my power without fear or apology. Those two are almost identical, and we didn't develop them together. Allie, can you just comment on like synchronicity in your life before we get into like the big introductions of you?
Absolutely. I mean, I so love the fact that those are the words that you chose, because they're powerful words, right? This idea of not asking for permission, not asking for, not apologizing. Mm-hmm. I have found that when I actually embody the work that I want to be doing, when I speak about it with other women, that they have these moments of, I was thinking that in the same way, but I wasn't sure how to articulate it, or when to articulate it, or to whom I should articulate it without sounding as if I'm kind of a walking mantra, right?
Right.
So for me, I have really found that the synchronicity comes when you step into the thing you're meant to do. You have this kind of electronic beacon that people are like, ooh, she's walking in her power. I can feel it, and I want to emulate it. You know, my favorite analogy is that when Harry met Sally scene, when she says, I'll have what she's having, that irresistibility, you kind of, when you're walking in your power energetically, people feel it. And for a lot of people, that actually does give them an indirect role model. Like, well, she's doing it, I want to do it. But you're not articulating it with words. It's not didactic. It's not intentional. You're not walking around with a billboard that says, live in your power, right? But it's modeling it in the most beautiful way. And then other people who are looking for that are going to find you. And I think that's why in that sea of women all those years ago, we found each other. I didn't remember your name, but I was like, that woman, the dean, I need to find her again. Let me try to scrounge in the bottom of my purse for that business card because I need to find her. And I think we do that when we find our people. We do that.
You know what I love, and I know we need to get into your introduction a bit here, but what you just talked about was not an elevator speech, which everywhere I go, everybody wants to, have their elevator speech. And we'll talk about narrative in a minute, but you're like, you don't have to have an elevator speech. You have to be profoundly present in your own authenticity. That's very, very different, right?
Yep, it is. And the elevator pitch, to me, is how do you make it succinct, not how do you make it meaningful, right? Yeah. Like, so when I talk to women about any sort of a way of describing what they do or who they are, it's never proscribing that language. It's, okay, great, you're walking your power, now how do we make it short enough, because people's attention spans are getting shorter and shorter, so that it's meaningful. Not so much, how do we put on you some statement that was crafted by somebody else, which you're somehow memorizing, right? That's like exactly the opposite of what you want.
So let's just back up a little bit so that everybody knows, because we definitely jumped in. So for all of my listeners, Allie and I thought about this show, because if you've listened to any of the statistics from 2020, 5.2 million women lost jobs. Women are starting to be more interested and invested in side gigs, which often become their main gig, because they've learned they need a different fluidity and a sense of opportunity in their lives. And so becoming an entrepreneur, sometimes it's a side gig for a while, but it allows us to adapt. And if 2020 showed us anything, we have to be adaptable. So Allie is an executive advisor, and so let's go, so she helps women do this. So let's go back. Allie, you've got a doctorate in sociology. How did you go from there to executive advisor? And maybe elaborate a little bit on what that is.
Sure, absolutely. So back, kind of moving backwards a little bit. So about 15 years ago or so, my husband and I started a consulting business called Sound Advice Consulting. And where we started was the things that we knew how to do, which is how most entrepreneurs start. They start as really good doers who say, I'd like to do this for myself. I want to create a different culture. I want to earn different money. I want to be in a different level of decision making. And over the years, Jason, my husband, and I started adding to our own skill sets and then adding to our lines of business based on the things that we were learning how to do. So a couple of years ago, I had already received my degree, my PhD in sociology, with a focus, by the way, in gender and emotional intelligence. So that gives you a little sneak peek of how I just have morphed that into working with women entrepreneurs. So understanding the impact of gender socialization and how it affects women's lives. But as an entrepreneur myself and a business owner, I said, well, wait a second. Socialization really impacts women's lives. Everything from your comfort level with taking risks, right? Women are, when girls are socialized into women, at least in this country, we're often taught to value safety over calculated risk taking, right? To watch out for danger instead of look out for opportunity. Right. We are taught to kind of be in a support role rather than to be the main character.
Right.
All of these messages end up impacting on our ability to be entrepreneurs. So actually, to me, a PhD in sociology is the perfect person to become to become an executive advisor. And so I'm very intentional in my language. I work with women entrepreneurs and founders, industry agnostic, right, as well as sector agnostic. I work with women who are the executive directors of not-for-profits. I work with women who are starting for-profit entities. It does not matter if it's a service business or a product business. What I am helping women do is 4 things. Build business infrastructure, build the processes that help them tie all those pieces together, understand and use data. So business intelligence, again, that goes back to my research background and being an academic. I understand data. And then emotional intelligence, how to walk through the world like an executive. So it was my own work in entrepreneurship, my background in sociology, recognizing where my strengths and talents lie. And that's how a PhD in sociology became an executive advisor for women entrepreneurs and founders.
Perfect. So I just want to, and I don't know that I've ever said this to you, but one of the things I love about what you just said is that you just made it perfect. So as you know, I've got a master's in geology, a PhD in psych, another master's in Jewish studies, and then now I'm doing radio and I do astrology. It's almost as if we can claim and acknowledge that our circuitous path was the perfect path, as opposed to, I don't know how to do that because I don't have a degree in it, or I'm not ready to do that because I've done this other thing my whole life. And you embody that ability to embrace a new direction and write a narrative that says it's perfect.
Well, and thank you, and yes, so I had 2 thoughts as you were just speaking. One of them was, when I was young, I don't know if everybody had this experience where you could put a quote in a yearbook, or your parents could put a quote in a yearbook for you. So the quote that my parents put in for me many, many years ago is actually a quote in Spanish, but I'll say it in English. It's, "Traveler, there is no road, you make the road upon traveling." It's a poet by the name of Antonio Machado. And so for me, that's kind of become, it was the way I opened up my grad school essay. Yeah, there is no road. You make the road upon traveling. And, you made this comment about not having X or Y. Those are what I call internal sales objections, right? We have plenty of external sales objections from customers, clients. We always have to think about, why is somebody not going to want this? And how do I preemptively show them why they need it before they tell me why they don't? So it's that same idea. What's your internal sales objection? And I work a lot with my clients on how to mitigate those, because obviously it's a form of protection. It's a form of masking fear. But I think that when you actually kind of lay out all the things you have a lot more than you need. And when women say, well, I don't have a business degree, that's when I say, well, but I do, right? So work with me and then you'll get what you need. So I'm always trying to pull away those internal sales objections, because that's also a very kind of, I think, gendered way of looking at risk. Again, it's another one of those fear of calculated risk-taking moments.
Right. I think we want to add now that men often have some of their own sociological gendered issues, and many of us, regardless of gender, perhaps based on culture, family of origin, we have had messages that told us the right way to be in the world. So I know you specialize in women, but somehow I think if the right guy showed up, you'd probably work with them too. Before we go further though, how do people find you? Because I know by the end of the show, there are people who are going to want to work with you.
Sure. So if you go to soundadvicewomen.com, or if you find me at Ali, A-L-I, at soundadvicewomen.com, those are the best ways to find me at this point, because I have found that connecting with me directly is a great way for you to understand the nuances, right? I have videos on my website that I hope will give you a better sense of who I am, but the kind of work I do, at least the one-on-one work, we'll talk about some of the other work, it's a really intimate relationship, and it's a commitment, and I always want people to feel that I and they are aligned, the way I speak, the pace at which I work, my goals and outcomes. I really feel like that needs to be well understood in addition to my resume or your resume.
Mm-hmm.
Really,
Yes.
when I work with my clients anyway, it's about them, it's not about me. And I want to make sure that the way that what they're looking for is the way that I can serve them. That's really important in our work together. And to your point, yes, super important to say that all of us have been influenced by socialization. And there are certainly men who have similar challenges or different challenges. I have chosen to work with women specifically because my passion is to create equity for women and my belief is that in a capitalist society, which is where we are, power comes from money and you don't get rich working for somebody else.
Right.
So,
and even, I think the other thing that I like about you, the way you work with people, is while your focus will be on helping them become financially independent and secure, that isn't a number. There's not a special number that goes with that. You're not a wealth advisor. You're helping them live like an executive in their life. Can you talk briefly, because you and I both, another synchronicity, do not refer to ourselves as a coach, and I think that that's intentional for both of us. So can you just give me the small blurb, perhaps, on how, as an advisor, you are unique in that world of that sea of coaches?
Sure. So it's a couple of things. First and foremost, as somebody who has, been through academic study, I'm very respectful of people who have studied coaching, who have coaching certificates, and I do not. So I am very respectful of the fact that I will not identify as such when there is a way, a methodology, a course of study. So that's first and foremost. But more even than that kind of respect for certification, I see myself in an advisory role because my work is about a highly customized experience rooted in what my client needs. And I want to make sure that I have the flexibility to customize. So that's why I prefer, also the name of our company is Sound Advice. We have made a conscious decision to be advisors. And that to me comes with, in my opinion, a lot more autonomy and a way to define the path. Going back to our conversation, I always like to define the path in the way that feels comfortable for me and my clients. And advisory for me feels much more malleable and agile than coach.
I agree. I talk to people often about helping them cross scary, narrow bridges. And that is not a coach. I'm not back there cheering them on. I'm sometimes in front showing them that the bridge is safe. Sometimes I'm advising them on how one evaluates the safety of a bridge, which is different than that notion of, and I'm not saying that's all coaches do, but I think for both of us, language is very, very important. So let's move on a little bit. We touched on you don't have to have this amazing background in something to start becoming an entrepreneur. So what if I come to you and I say, here's the things I do. I'd like to be an entrepreneur, but do I have something to sell? Do you have clients who start that basic? And if so, what do you do?
Yes, actually, I have clients who start even further back. I have clients who still work inside of a corporate environment who have said to me, I know there's more to life than working for somebody else. I know that the nature of my role inside this organization is not all I have to offer, but it's all they have to offer me. Can you help me think through what I know and how to best turn that into something that I can do on my own? So it's actually even before they're entrepreneurship is sort of a twinkle in their eye, but not quite. They want, and so absolutely. Here's the thing. As you were saying, Dr. Elisa, we have finally, I'm hoping, debunked this myth of the bi-monthly paycheck as security, right? This is part of that kind of hidden opportunity in the she session that you talked about before. So if we now recognize that there is no such thing as security in a corporation, well, maybe instead we can kind of turn the risk-taking and entrepreneurship on its head and say, actually, when it's yours, when you're in charge, when you can be agile, when you can pivot, that's actually safer. Yes. So I'm not rejecting safety as a narrative. That's important. It is. We have a healthcare system now in this country that has uncoupled healthcare from your work. It was very intentional. That was also, to me, a very big nod towards entrepreneurship, right?
Right.
So now we know that if we want to be the kind of in the center of our own narrative, well, we can be looking at what we want to be doing, and then people come to me and say, great, how do I price it? How do I operationalize it? How do I create my USP, my unique selling proposition, right? I say to my clients, so many things, goods, services, they've been commoditized, right? It is rare that you are going to do something that nobody else can. However, what you can give them, which you need to make them want more than anything else, is a relationship with you.
Yes.
And that's the part of it that I work so hard with them on. When they're in their authentic self, they're glowing, they're buzzing, and people are going to say, I need that woman in my life. Maybe she's doing something that 10 other people do, but that's literally almost not important.
Absolutely.
I want her in my life some way, and that's also what I work with my clients on.
So it's fascinating. There's so much you say that I just want to sort of reiterate and unpack. I also often say to clients, and I would do this with students when I was a dean and actually faculty, is it's really good to get fired when you're young from a job. Just get fired or get laid off. Have that experience. And when that happens, you will understand that life is about a plan A, B, C, and D. And that's fine. And when you have those, the security that you're seeking comes from you. You haven't handed your security to somebody else. I know I've been fired and laid off numerous times. And the last time I was like, I am so prepared for this. I can launch something else. This is fine. So I love that. I do want to go back to centering yourself in the narrative. And I just want you to explain that and explore that a little bit more for our listeners.
Sure, absolutely. So we live in a society where, especially in a corporation or a larger company, there's a lot of conversation about teams, right? Mm-hmm. There's that whole adage, there's no I in team. Then everybody saw the meme where somebody figured out that underneath the A in team, you can make an I with a dot over it. They said, I found the I in team, blah, 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 right?
Right.
Okay. But here's the thing. When you're an entrepreneur, at least at the very beginning, people will use your goods, you will buy your goods or use your services because they like you. Right? It's not because you have some huge brand. It's not because, you have influencers. It's because they like you. That means that you have to go 180 degrees from what you have been taught your whole life and actually say, first person singular, I.
Yes.
This is what I can do. This is how I can help you. This is how I am different. People, especially women, again, layering the gender socialization around this ridiculous nature of selflessness. I mean, not having a self. We could talk a whole lot about that's a goal, not having a self, whatever. So that basically what you're saying is, I am offering this. I am centering myself in the narrative. So not only does that mean in your about page, literally, or in your marketing materials, but what it also means is that you are confident saying that it matters that we are connected and in a relationship. That it matters that this is not for me a transaction, but this is for me something that matters. You matter to me. I need to matter to you. And I'm centering myself in the narrative so that you can get the best of what you need, and also so that I can give you all I've got. Because there is no system around me saying I need to do things this way or that way. And I can promise you this, a kind of side note to center yourself in the narrative is I always say to my clients, play your own game.
Yes.
Because what happens, people take all the risk of going out on their own, and then they somehow fall into that best practices trap where they let everybody else tell them how to run their business, and then their business model doesn't work for them So they take all the risk on going on their own, but then they somehow fall back on, well, everybody knows better than I because I'm a learner. I reject that wholesale.
I agree.
Center yourself in the narrative, play your own game.
I have to say, I don't know if I've recommended this book to you before, but there's, it's an older book, Machiavelli for Women. And
Yeah.
one of the things she says in there is if you're playing a game, which by definition you're going to lose, you're going to lose. So don't play that game. If you're going to play in that world, then change the rules, because otherwise you are destined to lose. And I think that we have you and I have experienced that ourselves, that having that courage. And of course, right now the internet is full of people telling you how they did it and selling you how they did it, as opposed to helping you find, which some of that is very legitimate. I'm not rejecting all of it, but the first part is to find what is authentic about you. What is it that you truly want to embed yourself in? And the reason I love this notion of centering in the narrative is you're doing two things, I think, but let me ask you. I'm centering myself in my narrative, but I'm also walking over and standing beside you so that you can center in yours. Is that what you're meaning?
1,000%, and that goes back to what I was saying before, is sometimes it's deliberate and explicit and sometimes it's implied. When you model that behavior, you are also helping other people recognize what it looks like. And, you know, as we learned from the White House Project many years ago, you can't be what you can't see. That was about women in politics.
Right.
Same idea. When my clients see me standing in my power and centering myself in the narrative, whether I'm explicitly educating them on that or not, it's by osmosis. They're seeing what it looks like, which helps them then define how that looks when they do it.
Right. I think it's how women mentor. It is not a bunch of lectures, but it is be present with me while I'm doing my work and learn the pieces of yourself. There's an old Hasidic story that I love, that the student goes off to study with a rabbi, we'll make it a Rebbitzin, but a rabbi, and someone says, what do you want to do? What do you want to learn? And the student says, I want to see how the Rebbitzin ties her shoes, how she makes soup, because she, in those moments, she's alive and living, and so it isn't a bunch of words, it isn't text, it isn't something with an exam at the end. It's that notion of learning how to be very present. So I love that. Very quickly, I just want to say, if you've just tuned in, this is the Dr. Elisa Show on KUHS Denver, the stream, with my amazing guest, Dr. Ali Hill, who is an executive advisor. Remind people how to find you, Ali.
Sure. soundadvicewomen.com or ali@soundadvicewomen.com. Let's connect.
Because she has helped people for so very long. And if you are wondering, can I be an entrepreneur? Is there something else? And if 2020 has shown you that you need a side gig, because that might be what you end up with, is a side gig so that you have that security, this is someone you want to talk to. So we already talked about that. I'm looking at all these questions I wanted to ask you. One of the things you also talk about, and we hear a great deal about, is how fear of failure is an obstacle, and that isolation is the dream killer. But 2020 was the year of isolation. So I've got a couple questions in here. I think we're coming out of 2020 more fearful. I'm just going to say that. I think that there's a lot of us who've got a lowered level of PTSD from 2020. And yet it's time to become an entrepreneur at this, right, simultaneously. And it's a year of isolation for many of us. So if somebody comes to you now, a new client coming off of 2020, how might you discuss those two elements, the fear of failure and the isolation?
Sure. So a couple of things, and I really appreciate your using that line. It's a perfect segue. So my work is, for the past 3 years, has been very heavily in one-on-one. But as a sociologist, I recognize that there is real value in a community. And luckily at this point, we have the internet. We have a lot of ways to connect digitally that are physically safe during a pandemic. right? And so one of the things that I decided to do during the pandemic was to expand my business from one-on-one work to what I would call, you know, one to few or one to many. Hopefully it's growing. Maybe you'll come join us. And I decided to create a digital community for women entrepreneurs and founders called Click Club. And what Click Club is, and by the way, it's called that because I had this moment and the idea clicked, and so I wanted to put it in the name, was that there are so many amazing books written by women authors that describe the experiences of being women, but that are not business books. However, they have so much knowledge in them that we could use in our businesses. So I said, what if I were to aggregate a group of women? Each month we would read a book, and then I would analyze that book through the lens of entrepreneurship, so that we could get all this amazing learning, but none of these books would say, you know, business book or business psychology in the back flap. And then in so doing, create a group of women. And so that's exactly what I've done. And the reason I'm walking you through this is for those of you who are entrepreneurs out there already or budding, and you're in a one-to-one business. We know it's hard to scale. We know it's hard to take a vacation. This is a way for you to dip a toe in how could I do something with a group of people. And that is what I have done with Click Club. We have 45 women in it. We meet monthly on Zoom. We read the book. If you don't read the book, no worries, because I do an exec summary. I send a video out analyzing it, and then we discuss it for an hour. And so that's another way of creating community connection online to minimize that isolation, which is the entrepreneurial dream killer, as well as to keep you physically safe right now while we're still in a pandemic and there's a lot of fear around that.
Right.
So thinking about ways to expand what you do into a digital community environment, I think is one way to mitigate some of the isolation we've all been feeling without having to make the decision of whether or not you need to put your physical health in danger in order to connect with others.
There's an element of the Click Club that so speaks to me, and that it is speaking to entrepreneurial women, but not reading books about being an entrepreneur. Because I think that comes back to how women communicate. And we communicate through story, through narrative. So you are reading books, and the list of books is amazing. What book are you reading this month, by the way?
So we just had our meeting yesterday,
Okay.
and we read the book Freedom is an Inside Job by Zainab Salbi. It's amazing. I highly recommend it. She's an incredible entrepreneur, founder, humanitarian, who, to your point, Dr. Elisa, used her own experiences as a young girl in Iraq during the war, during Saddam Hussein, and how she parlayed that into Women for Women International, only to realize, I love this line, she had a crown on her head but shackles around her ankles. Wow. that wasn't actually her calling after a while, and how to transition out of something you founded. It's a brilliant book. I highly recommend it. So it's that kind of work. It is not a business book, but we dove into her incredible, rich, beautiful language in ways that really dovetails with the challenges we're having as entrepreneurs and founders.
It's fascinating, isn't it, that women's stories that are not necessarily autobiographies, but are rich narratives of experience, have so much wisdom in there. And yet when we go to a business class, and I was an academic dean and worked closely with the dean of the business college, everything are these very straight-laced business books, and even in the nonprofit management world, as if that field cannot break out of its own cage, its own boundary definition. I think you'll like this one. I'd love it if you'd comment on it. I talk about one of the things that I'd like my clients to do is dance at the edge of other people's comfort zone. You definitely do that. I'm wondering if that sparks any ideas in your head when I say that.
Absolutely. So here's the thing, right? I am a big learner, and I recognize, it's kind of a mindset, it's an outlook. Somebody always has something to teach me. Click Club came out of I love to read. Wouldn't it be great if I could get other women who wanted to read with me and learn with me, right? It was very much kind of centering myself in the narrative. I enjoy this. I wonder if other people would, and I can make money at it because it's not a traditional book club. It's a group advisory group, you know, basically it's group advisory, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this idea of, you know, kind of dancing at the edge of somebody else's comfort zone, right? Understanding where other people are at often give you incredible insight, not only where you say, aha, this is not just me, right? A lot of us get into that kind of dark hole of I'm the only one, fill in the blank.
Yes.
So first of all, you're saying, wow. And second of all, you're saying, interesting how she resolved it. I would do it a little bit differently if it were me. And here's what I would do. It's like that question prompt. It gives you a way. We all know that it's easier to edit than to create, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So in that way, you're kind of editing her narrative on how you would do it for yourself,
Mm-hmm.
which is a fabulous way when you're not sure where to begin to kind of start outlining what's possible, because you're going to begin at the edge of somebody else's narrative, and then you're going to make it your own.
It's so fascinating because so much of what you talk about is reflective of Joseph Campbell's work.
Yep.
He talked about growing up without role models, but that he had role models in these amazing books and these authors. And that one of his famous lines is that you cannot walk into the forest where there's a path because it's somebody else's path. So we hear that message over and over. You are pitching it in a way that is specifically to women and using information from women's journeys that opens up women's ability and ability to acknowledge that they too can be an entrepreneur.
Yes, and I think something that's also important to note, a lot of the journey narrative, the hero's journey, you know, it's this concept of the solitary man, usually.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the things I wanted to bring out is I actually don't believe in that notion of the solitary genius. We've all got the narrative of the person in their garage who built some sort of tech product, right?
Right.
So when you say to me, carve a different path, well, I'm already thinking, well, gosh, my friend Megan is really excellent at, she's an outdoors woman. So I would bring Megan along with me to help me clear a new path because I don't know how to do that and I'd be afraid to break my ankle. And wow, I have another friend who is excellent at, she's an amazing vegan chef. I want to make sure I have the right snacks to keep me, you know, fed on that journey. I need to bring her along so she can provide me with what I need for snacks. Like, so my immediate thought is always, yes, I need to forge this path, but there is no way I'm doing that by myself.
That is so brilliant because I know I finished my second novel and I had somebody read it, a friend of mine, and he said, do you understand the hero's journey? And I said, yeah. He goes, well, you didn't follow the rules of it. I'm like, it's a woman's story, right? So if you think of the hero's journey, you've got Luke Skywalker, he blasts the spaceship out, and wow, they all celebrate, and they've destroyed the Death Star, and it's great. And they get an award. And then you're like, okay, and now the women are going to clean up the room. And now what are you going to do, dude? I mean, you got this, now you've got to come back and share your gift. And by the way, by blowing up the Death Star, there's a few other political issues. Thank goodness Princess Leia is good at negotiation because there's other stuff that follows. It's not an end point. And I think women know that. I'm not in any way trying to say that men are not capable of that. I just think that it's interesting to acknowledge that there are differences between us, right?
And in fairness, there's a different set of socialization rules.
Absolutely.
It may be that men had this similar human instinct to want to involve others.
Mm-hmm.
However, unfortunately, they've received messages their entire life that needing others was a sign of weakness, right?
Okay.
So I always say that we've all been socialized. We've just been denied opposite ends of the spectrum.
Yes.
Women can't be angry, men can't be sad, right? We all, if we can acknowledge that we have been given a set of rules, then guess what? If somebody gave you a set of rules that were constructed, then you have the ability to deconstruct them. And that's a lot of my work as well with women, showing them where they think they have a personal failing, and I actually show them that it was an intentional strategy. Not that any one person wanted her to feel this way, but in a system that systems like to keep themselves going.
Absolutely.
Right?
Right.
So, and we as entrepreneurs, man, woman, non-binary, we all want to actually take what is happening and change it. Systems don't like us, right? Entrepreneurs by their nature are radical.
Right, absolutely.
And so I think that that's also part of this, right? You are rejecting the set of rules you were given as to how success is defined, as to how you need to be a grown-up. So yeah, in general, I think we're all a bunch of just radicals who want to upend the systems. That's who we are as entrepreneurs.
I call us pirates, and a lot of what you say, I need to send you a copy of my Pirate Wisdom book, actually, because so much of what you're talking about is exactly like that. So how do I know if I'd be a good entrepreneur? Is there, a scale, a measure? Is there some way, personality that works, or can anyone do it with the intentionality?
So I have had this conversation with people who love to say to me, not everybody can be an entrepreneur. I kind of disagree. Not everybody can be an entrepreneur without guidance, without a community, without help. But I believe that if you feel strongly that you either love something that you want to scale, or you want to change something that you don't want to keep scaling, that passion, that fire burning within you, creates an entrepreneurial mindset. And then the question becomes, what is the business model to either scale the thing you want to see grow bigger or curtail the thing you want to see end? And then it's about looking at a business model. And look, not everybody is going to be the lead salesperson. Not everybody has the technology skills. But that's not what entrepreneurship is. To me, entrepreneurship means you have a vision for something you want to create. You want to be in charge of that. You are passionate and authentic. That to me is who an entrepreneur is. It's not your gender. It's not your sex. It's not where your startup capital came from. It's not what industry you're in. It's not your socioeconomic class. And this is where the sociologist in me comes out, right?
I know.
These are all of these categories that I wholesale reject as being synonymous with entrepreneur. I think it's a lot of the entrepreneurs we see in the media follow a certain trope, but that's not what entrepreneurship is, and I'm really invested in clawing back the idea of who gets to be an entrepreneur.
I love that idea that there definitely is a trope, and that we are then, and you said that earlier, we start out on our own and then we somehow say, they must know more than me. I think there's also a tendency, and I wonder if you can address this. Let me use authors as a example. Authors like to write books. Hopefully, they like to write something. They like to write. But they don't want to publish. They don't want to work with an editor. They don't want to find the book cover. I have more and more people who say to me, I write, I need to find a manager. I need to find an agent. I speak, but I need to find an agent. And as if all we can do is the work without in any way presenting ourselves with the work. So I'm sure you hear that from people. How do you address that?
Sure. So there's a couple of ways to address that. This, at the beginning, it depends upon your startup capital. Okay? If you say to me, Allie, I really love authoring these books. However, I do not want to organize a speaking tour. I don't want to self-publish, but I'm not sure how to get on a publisher's radar screen. Do I need an agent? What does that look like? Well, my first question for you is, well, how much money do you have to spend? Because there are ways to delegate and outsource any number of those pieces of your business if you have the means through which to pay another individual. If you find that you don't have a lot of startup capital, there are ways to use systems and technology so that you can automate some of this and you can still be somebody who is not on the stage, right? For some authors, it's, I'm really not comfortable in that on the stage role. There are ways that we can use technology to keep you backstage, if you will, but keep you front and center in terms of top of mind visibility. So that's my answer to you, is really, if you have money and you'd like to outsource and delegate, we can do that. If you don't have the money, we can use technology so that you can be, like, for example, a lot of writers don't like to speak off the cuff, right? Extemporaneous speaking for them is not the way they walk through the world. They're very deliberate. They're in love with words. To them, word choice is almost a sacred act, and so they don't want to be put on the spot. Okay, but we can create marketing opportunities that are not off the cuff, where you can continue to be in love with your words because we use written marketing, or we do a video of you that's scripted. So it's really working with somebody who, like me, who understands that there are myriad ways to get your message out there and who supports you being authentic. I never, ever sell my clients on a way to do something. It's always, how do you want to do this? And I will help you make it happen, because it can't work for me. It has to work for them.
Right. It is interesting that that word authenticity continually flows back into the conversation, and that, so perhaps that is why I've met so many entrepreneurs who've tried selling other products, but then came back and realized at the base of that, the foundation was they loved working with people around a certain topic. The product was not theirs. So that I think there's again, a need to find where are we authentic and present, because that's where we're creative, that's where we're soulful. And as you said, that's when people want to be in the room with us. They want to share a narrative with us because of that. So I sort of, yes.
Exactly. And here's the thing, there are many people out there who do not need to have created the product or service to be passionate about it, right? So I wanted to just add that in.
Yes.
It's not about whether you were the creator, it's about whether or not you need to have been the creator to care. There are plenty of people who say, I love that makeup line because it doesn't have garbage in it. I love that, you know, line of apparel because they're using sustainable practices around the materials they're using. I want to be an evangelist on behalf of that product. So it's the authenticity around the connection to it, not necessarily if you've created it, because not everybody needs to be a creator to be an evangelist.
Right. Yeah, I think that there are so many different aspects to entrepreneurship and ways that we can emotionally connect with what we're doing, that we can envision ourselves as successful without worrying about, I'm not the first one to do this. And in fact, what I'd like to do is, how do we define success for ourselves? We've come out of these worlds, both of us are academics, where there's a grade, and there's a GPA, and there's a degree, and that's lovely for what it is, but that, you can't measure that as an entrepreneur. So how do you help people define success?
Sure, and you know, and I really appreciate that question, because so often we've had success defined for us in our lives in every single way. And one of the things I work with on my clients is really getting to what they care about, why they are doing this, what their needs are. Because they may say to me, their need is not necessarily at the beginning a financial need. It may be, yes, I need to have a floor of what I make because I have these obligations to myself or to my family or to our family's budget. But more, it's, Allie, I want to be in charge of every decision that gets made, because so often I have felt ignored in my corporate job, and I really feel I have something. So success for them looks like they were able to launch an idea that they had, and it was actually respected in the marketplace, right? They may say to me, success for me looks like being able to work fewer hours and spending more time with family or with myself. So we define a product or a service that they can do in the time they have allotted. So when I say to them, what does success look like? Often at the beginning, they're not quite sure, because they're not usually being given the luxury of defining it. And part of what we do is we backwards map it, right? We say, I always say, let's be committed to the outcome, but not the way we get there.
Absolutely.
Let's start at the end. Let's talk about what success would look like. And then we will create a business model that aligns with your success. But if they do say, hey, I want to make $1 million by the time I'm a certain age, and they're 3 to 5 years out, then I say, okay, excellent. Now let's look at what it's going to take to bring in that kind of revenue, which changes their business model usually, because that kind of revenue requires a much different business model than most people start out using. So again, it's first giving them the opportunity to define success for themselves, and by the way, helping them if they don't know how to do that, because that's a big part of it as well.
Yeah, I agree. Once we've come out of a society that measures everything based on a grade, an exam, your speed during a race, when did you finish, how many people get to your website. It's really fascinating. I've had people say to me, well, how do you know you're successful on the radio? I'm like, well, some of it's numbers. A lot of it is the feedback I get from people. A lot of it is the feeling I have inside, and how much fun my guests are having when they're on the show. We're getting to the end of our time here. Let's just do a little bit of this if we can. I've got about 5 minutes. So we've both shattered glass ceilings, you and I, and have swept the floor to make sure that no one else steps on the shards. And I'm wondering how you have dealt with your own experience in being an entrepreneur. How did you learn to take out? Was it that upbringing you had with that first quote from that poet? What happens when you get to the edge of your comfort zone?
So I think for me, entrepreneurship really evolved from a place of feeling that every role that I had that somebody else created was never enough for me. Mm-hmm. That narrative of staying in your lane, the idea that your age defines your contributions. Mm-hmm. I kind of wholesale reject the concept of hierarchy based on anything. I understand hierarchy is necessary. You need to have roles and responsibilities, right? I am the CEO of a company. I'm the founder. I appreciate and value that people need to know whom to go for which thing. Mm-hmm. But I think hierarchy gets used in a very different way. I think it gets used to define where good ideas can come from.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So I think for me, yes, it was, having parents who, gave me that quote. It was my mother is an educator who always, really believes in lifelong learning and my ability as a learner. My father worked in finance and he worked in risk management. Oh, wow. So he taught me very young that you cannot mitigate risk. What you have to do is learn how to take calculated risks. Yes. And not to be fearful when you know how to take calculated risks. So that was huge for me growing up. And then over time, I think it was really and truly having this winding path, right? Mm-hmm. My education is not a straight line, and my work is not a straight line. And I started to realize that all of these different industries and sectors I had worked in actually were my ace in the hole. Because my job right now is to be a problem solver and to be a big thinker. And because I have had this windy path, yes, it's actually a huge asset because I wasn't kind of in this monoculture. I wasn't in this monolithic role. So I'd say to anybody out there, if you feel like, well, I've had this job and that job and it makes no sense, actually it makes you really well-rounded. Right. And that can become a huge asset to you as an entrepreneur, right, not a deficit in a world that oftentimes values expertise over being a generalist.
Right. I often talk to my clients about tacking up wind when you're sailing, which is the same as climbing a mountain with switchbacks. You're never on course. You're going up or you're going in a direction, but you're actually never on course till that last switchback, which takes you to the top, or that last tack in the sailboat where you're finally on course. You're getting closer. And that is what my life has been like. I've been tacking up wind my entire life, and I agree with you that it is the circuitous path, it is the richness of the diversity of experience that then lends itself, opens my heart to being an entrepreneur, and I think also teaches me that most risk is imagined, that there's so much that we might be fearful of that isn't real. So we just have a minute. What keeps you inspired now?
So what keeps me inspired now? I also just want to say really fast that in addition to my parents, having the business partnership with my husband as well, he is an entrepreneur, having somebody to whom I could go with some of my questions and have the two of us think them through together, that partnership role is really critical. Again, whether that thought partner is a spouse, a business partner, an advisor, I want to keep saying that this is not a solitary journey. And having those people in your life is going to be very important to your success.
Right. So 30 seconds. 30 seconds. What keeps you inspired?
What keeps me inspired is the fact that we have a groundswell in this country of recognizing things aren't working. And we have the tools and the resources and the people who are now saying, I can make a difference in this, and I don't need to be a certain type of human to do it. It's the first time, I think, in our country's history that we recognize that every one of us has the capacity to do that, and that groundswell of belief in our capacity to make change is what keeps me inspired every day.
That is awesome, and we are going to end with that. You have been listening to the Dr. Elisa Show on KUHS Denver with the amazing and wonderful Dr. Allie Hill. You can find her at Sound Advice. Just Google it, you will find her. We'll also make sure that on Facebook and Twitter that we also put her links in after the show. And I want to just thank you so much for joining me. And my last message to all of my listeners is to stay inspired in whatever it is that ignites within you. So light your own fire. Find that spark. Stay safe, stay well, but most importantly, stay inspired.